I definitely think hip hop has had an effect on youth culture when it comes to fashion. Everybody had their phase where they were sagging their jeans. At some point, people wearing their do-rags. At some point, now the tats and the basketball vests. You see it every time there's a new trend in hip hop. You can see it reflected in the youth.
Ukivaa certain way ukitembea hata ghetto unasema huyu ni msanii ama huyu ni msanii wa reggae. Umevaa pipe, but ukivaa baggy jeans, huyu ni msanii wa rap. So from then until now, fashion is making more money now than hip hop. It used to be the other way around. As hip hop artists, tumekuwa like walking billboards of brands. Kenyan anaweza dunga gumboots kwa show na kesho wase wote wanadunga gumboots kwa show. Fashion imekuwa powerful than even the music. Anaweza sema kitu kwa ngoma, tutasikia, to appreciate, but we won't do it. But the way he dresses, everybody, even if you're not a fan of hip hop, you'll end up trying to be like him. So it's been like one of the most important and like nasema, it may change hip hop as times goes until today.
Yeah, I'm a big dog walking, y'all cannot hold me, yeah. Don't want no problems, don't look at my chain, I'm shooting my shot like I'm Kobe. Got the assist, come and put up on my lonely.
The fashion has gone and changed from baggy to skinny jeans to now people wearing crazy stuff. I personally am a big fan of colors because I realize many people are scared of colors. And also it depends with which neighborhood you're coming from. You dress as per your neighborhood. There's places you can't dress those baggy jeans. There's places you can't dress skinny jeans. And there was the bling. That was the era of the bling. The bling is like a signature until today. That's one thing that hasn't changed when it comes to like hip hop fashion.
How was the scene before Prezzo came along?
It was dead. There was no scene. They recognized Prezzo as the person who brought the show into the business. There was no industry before Prezzo, but when Prezzo came, he just flipped the whole script, and that's why there's nobody who can speak Kenyan music or East African music without mentioning yours truly.
Looking for my name, Kenya hadi bongo.
So even my dream back in the day was always to become this famous person. But then, at that time, my dream seemed impossible because there was no industry. Let's start from there. But then that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands.
I was privileged to actually produce for Prezzo his first single, Naleta Action. And what he brought to the industry in terms of showbiz and artistry, I found amazing because he brought in now the flashiness, the showmanship when he gets on stage, landing in choppers over almost 15, 20 years ago. Nobody had done that back then. He brought this showmanship image, which we hadn't seen before. And he had two sides to him. He had the side where he talked about issues, but he was also an entertainer. Still do his love songs, floss mode songs, you know what I mean? He was well-rounded back then. Yeah, so I think that he was one of the artists who played a major role when it comes to, this whole showbiz game.
Back in the days, our counterparts, the people we aped, had a certain kind of look that we admired. Run DMC, people like LL Cool J, Cool Modi, Fat Boys, all those guys. So we figured we also have to look like those people, just as is the norm. The youth want to look like what is trending. We used to get them in tapes and magazines. There was a magazine called Right On, there was Word Up, then later The Source. So we had to look like the people we see in those magazines. And back in the days, it was hard to get those clothes. There were no exhibitions, there were no clothes like there today. Clothes had to be brought, unless someone had come from abroad. You wouldn't get people wearing the clothes that were there. And the mitumba, where we used to get the clothes from the second hand, they arrived late, so you couldn't get what was latest. So that's when I decided to also start making clothes so that I look like those people as they look currently. So when someone looks at a magazine, and around that time, the things that were cool were like the baseball shirts and all that. So I started by making like baseball shirts because we couldn't get them anywhere. We could get shoes once in a while, but getting our size was a problem. But we tried because most of them were brought by the American sailors. They used to come a lot to Mombasa, and most of them were very tall. So they'd leave shoes that are like size 13, size 15, very, very big shoes, very nice Reebok. Nike, those days Reebok was the end thing, and we couldn't get our sizes, so we had to coin something. That's how Fundi Frank came up. Back then everything was happening in Nairobi. The TV stations, all the vibe was in Nairobi. So that's when I grabbed my machine that I do embroidery with and I moved to Nairobi. So I settled in South Sea. South Sea was very significant because it brought up some of the artists who ended up being big. Someone like Issa, the late Issa. Issa was my neighbor. So him and his brother were my first customers. As kids, they used to come to stitch their clothes. But Hardstone, because of the name he had made, Hardstone introduced me to Kalamashaka because Kalamashaka was now the upcoming artists of Sing Sound Studios. So Kalamashaka are the ones who now embraced my fashion more than even Hardstone, because now there were many and they wore them now properly and they came in with a hip-hop culture now proper. And I thank them a lot for that because they really insisted back then in wearing my clothes because there was a culture of shoes, nice shoes had come up. I literally worked with almost all the artists who had emerged back then.
I registered Mavazi handprint in the year 2008. And at that particular point, now because people had started coming, so I was looking at ways of expanding and getting funds to actually do what I loved, which was now the design and fashion. One day I was sitting at home and then I was just watching, I think it was Channel 5, EATV, and then I saw a video of Bow Wow. And I think the song is called Basketball. That's the point when I saw Bow Wow with painted t-shirt of his face. Then I was like, what is this? I want to learn this thing, man. So I started doing it using brushes and my hands because I was like, hey, no one else is doing this not just in Kenya, but I came to realize later on, even within Africa, no one was doing the airbrush t-shirts. So I became one of the gurus. At that particular point, I started asking myself, who is going to rock these t-shirts? So I didn't want to do it just for friends and people who appreciated my work. I needed now to take it to the next step. It is when we were doing East Africa Motor Show, I realized the potential was if I approach artists to rock my t-shirts and they shoot the videos with my t-shirt, how I saw it with Bow Wow, I'd be able to shine more. So I actually approached a few guys. I remember it was 2005 is when I actually went to try and get these artists to rock my t-shirts.
Talent is like 1%, according to me. Yeah, you could be the dopest rapper, but if you are stinky, if you don't look approachable, if you can't even look nice in a picture, nobody wants to be associated. Like, hey, he's nice. It ends there. But for like hip-hop artists like us, when I was not doing love songs, to get the female fans, I had to dress up like really dope because they're like, hey, we like the way he dresses. I don't know what he's rapping about because they can't relate, but they could relate to the style. I used to wear more blings then. I used to wear wooden blings. So I had to come with my own style. I used to wear wooden blings with the number 8 because I wanted a signature of mine. Then slowly I got into like gold chains. Silver is very hardcore in Kibera. If you wear silver, it's not for hip hop. That you're a Rasta man for silver. But with time, I started not wearing more blings. I think in the beginning when you're starting, you have to show people like, oh, look at me, I'm fresh, I'm flashy, I have this money. But I realized when you really get the money, you don't want people to know. So you start dressing down.
There's nothing they didn't say. But at the end of the day, whatever they would say and their actions were totally two different things. They would say this and that, but inside their hearts, they'll be like, hey, that guy has swag. He knows how to hold himself. So definitely people will try and bash you, and I was already ready for that. So it didn't change much because after some time, they all followed suit.
Man, I used to sleep only for 3 hours because of the number of orders I'm getting from people, from cost, It's just as I've said, if people were mentored early enough, they should be able to elevate their business. Not just to do it for fun, man. That's the truth.